So one of the things that struck me in the book was you talked about, I think it was Venezuela, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a poll done, after its democracy had gone away, and some astonishing number of people there still thought they were actually living in a democracy.
Right.
So
that's right. Yeah, it was Venezuela. That's right. Yeah, it's a frightening thing. I mean, I think that's one of the title of our book again is How Democracies Die, and when people often ask us, well, how do democracies die? And we say really they die in two different ways. I mean, during the Cold War, the primary way that democracies died was through these very vivid moments, singular moments of authoritarian coups or military coups. I mean, 3/4 of democratic breakdowns happened this way during the Cold War. Since the collapse of communism, though, given the existence of elections around the world and the kind of general, embrace of democracy around the world after the collapse of communism, the way that democracies collapse now is through elections. And so this often happens in a much more incremental way. And so it's very frightening. I mean, actually, I'm kind of reminded here of a quote from Ernest Hemingway in The Sun Also Rises, a character in The Sun Also Rises was asked, so you went bankrupt. How did you go bankrupt? He said, I went bankrupt in two ways. First, very slowly, and then very quickly. And so I think a similar kind of story, unfortunately, can apply to democracies, that the kind of erosion of democracy does take place slowly. And, so we need, and I think in many ways the U.S. is experiencing this. And so to prevent the moment of rapid collapse, I think we need to work very hard.
Right, because once you reach that point of rapid collapse, it's too late, right?
Yeah, and so and I think the way that this actually takes place is through this kind of spiraling effect where both sides view each other as enemies and neither side wants to compromise, and you kind of get into this death spiral where it's really hard to break out of. In many ways, I think all of us, including myself, have taken our own democracy for granted. And we tended to think that politicians can act as reckless as they want and our institutions are strong. But I think that actually, you look around the world, that's really not the case. And so we really, again, part of the purpose of writing the book is to alert people to the basic fragility of our institutions.
So you also say in the book that democracy is grinding work, which kind of ties back to our whole theme of this podcast, democracy works. So can you talk a little bit more about what that phrase means to you, grinding work?
Yeah, so that's good. This is a question nobody's asked me before. So So there's this distinction. There's a great German sociologist, Max Weber, has this distinction between the politics of ultimate ends and the politics of responsibility. And the politics of ultimate ends, Weber says, what are your goals? What are your big visions in politics? And it's important to have big visions and big goals and high policy priorities. But politics is also just about behaving in responsible ways, democratic politics. And so in a way, it's a distinction between process and policy. And so what we think is that often one has to make compromises in politics in process in order to achieve one's goals. But what we think at the end of the day is that one has to remain committed to the process and that one has to, forge alliances with people that one may disagree with on policy terms in order to defend democratic institutions. And so one of the points that we make is that, it's important for Democrats, for instance, who want to defend democratic institutions to reach out to people they may not normally think they reach out to. So kind of, I come from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's a solidly blue state. And when people think of their political allies, they think of the kind of usual suspects. But our point is that, in order for Democrats, that is, with a small d, Democrats who are patriots of democracy, they need to reach out to people they may disagree with, whether that's business leaders, evangelical Christians, again, groups that they may not normally think of as allies, but people who are committed to the democratic process. People need to kind of find strange bedfellows in a way who are committed to the process of democracy, and that's hard work. It's frustrating work. It's slow-moving work, and so I guess that's why I call it grinding work.